I remember that evening clearly, the sun dipping low beyond the garden fence, painting the kitchen walls in amber and rose. The kettle hissed softly, a sound that had always comforted me. But that day, even the warm light and familiar noise couldn't ease the unease growing in my chest. My daughter Leah had been distant for weeks. She moved through the house like a shadow, soft but heavy with something unsaid. When she finally appeared at the doorway, dressed in a pale blue dress and holding her phone tightly in her hand, I knew. A mother always knows when her child is standing on the edge of something she can't be pulled back from. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, calm the way I always did when I was afraid of the answer. Leah looked at me, and for a moment I saw that little girl she used to be, Freckles. Nervous smile, eyes that used to search mine for permission, but this time there was something different in them. Resolve, sadness, love. "To meet the man you told me to forget," she said, and just like that, my world tilted. If this had been any other moment, I might have laughed, might have scolded her, or reminded her that young love fades like summer rain. But her tone wasn't rebellious. It was steady, almost mournful. She wasn't defying me, she was grieving something I had taken from her. I set down the kettle, its whistle fading into silence. The air between us thickened. "Leah," I began, but she shook her head, her curls catching the last light of the day. "You don't have to say anything, Mama," she whispered. "I just need you to know that I'm not a child anymore. And I can't pretend he never mattered." Her voice cracked slightly, and my heart followed. I wanted to tell her that I hadn't asked her to forget him out of cruelty, that I'd seen the pain in that young man's eyes, the kind that comes from secrets and scars too heavy for his years, that I feared the way he looked at her, like she was both his salvation and his destruction. But how could I explain that to her without sounding like I was protecting my own mistakes? "Leah," I said softly, "some loves are meant to teach us, not to stay with us." She met my gaze, and there in her eyes, I saw the same fire I once had when I was her age. The same fire that had made me run away from my own mother's warnings, right into the arms of the man who would one day leave me with both a daughter and a lifetime of regrets. She didn't answer. Just turned toward the door, her steps measured, like she'd rehearsed them. And in that instant, I wasn't just watching my daughter walk out. I was watching a younger version of myself repeat history, the one I'd tried so hard to erase. As the front door clicked shut, I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the chair creaking beneath the weight of my guilt. The clock ticked softly. The house, once filled with her laughter and humming, now felt hollow. I picked up her empty cup from the counter, the one she'd left behind that morning. A faint lipstick mark still clung to its rim. I traced it with my thumb, a simple reminder that she was still my little girl, even if she thought she'd outgrown my protection. I remembered the first time she'd mentioned him, Malik, a kind, quiet boy from her literature class who'd helped her pick up her scattered papers one rainy afternoon. I had seen them together once, sitting on the porch steps, sharing secrets in the language only the young and hopeful understand. I hadn't said anything then. I'd only watched silently, praying he wouldn't be the kind of man who'd promise forever and leave before sunrise. But when I found out who he really was, the son of the man who once broke my world, I couldn't stay silent anymore. That was the day I told her to forget him, and now, sitting alone in that fading light, I realized she never had. I looked out the window, the street empty, except for the soft hum of distant cars and the glow of streetlights flickering to life. Somewhere out there, she was meeting him. Somewhere, she was choosing her own heartbreak, and I was left behind, once again, trying to protect a heart that didn't want to be protected. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling slightly. For a moment, I thought of calling her, of begging her to come home. But then I stopped, because maybe, just maybe, this was something she needed to face on her own. Still, I whispered into the silence, "Please, Leah." "Don't let history repeat itself." The kettle whistled again, louder this time, as if echoing the ache in my chest. I turned it off, then sat back down, pressing my hands together in quiet prayer. And in that stillness, I remembered the night I first met her father. The promises, the laughter, the goodbye that never really ended. History has a cruel way of circling back when you least expect it. It's strange how the quiet feels different after someone leaves. The same walls, the same clock ticking, but everything heavier as if the air itself remembers what was just said. I sat there for a long while after Leah left, staring at the empty space she'd walked through, wondering if I'd done the right thing years ago when I tore her away from Malik. Back then, it felt like the only choice I had. Malik's father, Raymond Cole, had once been everything to me: charm and danger, wrapped in a suit that always smelled faintly of bourbon and promises. I was young, foolish, and thought I could fix a man who didn't want to be fixed. By the time I realized love doesn't heal lies, it was too late. Raymond was gone, leaving behind a handful of broken dreams and a child I had to raise alone. When Leah told me she was seeing Malik Cole, my knees went weak. The name alone felt like a curse whispered back from the past. I couldn't let my daughter walk the same path I had. Not with the son of that man. Not with the shadow of what he'd done still clinging to our name. But love doesn't listen to reason. Especially when it's young. I remember the night it all came crashing down 2 years ago. Leah had come home late, her eyes red, her voice trembling. She stood in the kitchen just like she had today and said, "Mama, please, just meet him. He's not his father." But I couldn't. The memories of what Raymond had done, the betrayal, the money he stole, the way he disappeared without a word still burned in me. I'd spent years patching my life together, building walls so I'd never be fooled again. So I told her, "Some names carry storms, Leah, and his is one of them." She'd cried that night, begged even, but I stayed firm. And in that firmness, I watched something in her break, not just her heart, but her trust in me. Now, 2 years later, she was walking out the door to see him again. A part of me wanted to be angry, but another part, a quieter, wiser part, whispered that maybe I had pushed her too hard. Maybe in trying to keep her safe, I had only made the forbidden more magnetic. The phone rang suddenly, cutting through my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Renee, my sister. I hesitated before answering. She always knew when something was wrong, always had that intuition that could slice right through my defenses. "Denise," she said softly. "What's wrong, sis?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice came out tired. "It's Leah. She's seeing him again." A sigh crackled through the line. "You mean Malik?" I closed my eyes. "Yeah, the Cole boy." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us carried years of history, of secrets that never quite left the room. "Denise," Renee said finally, "you can't punish that boy for what his daddy did. Raymond's sins ain't his." "I know that," I whispered, rubbing my temples. "But every time I see that name, I remember the way he walked out. The way he left me to pick up the pieces." "Then maybe it's time to stop carrying that hurt," Renee said gently. "You raised Leah better than that. She's got your strength and his fire, but she deserves the chance to choose what love means to her." Her words stung because they were true. I had taught Leah to stand tall, to fight for what she believed in. But I hadn't taught her how to forgive not others, and certainly not me. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light for a long time, the sound of the clock marking every passing minute. I wanted to call Leah again, to tell her I was sorry, that maybe I'd been wrong. But old stubborn pride kept my hands still, so instead, I whispered a prayer. "Lord, watch over her. Keep her safe. Don't let my past ruin her future." The wind outside had started to pick up, the trees brushing against the windows in restless rhythm. I walked to Leah's room, half to tidy up, half to feel closer to her. Her perfume lingered in the air, soft, floral, young. I sat on her bed, tracing the stitching on her pillow, and that's when I saw it. A letter tucked beneath the lamp. I hesitated before picking it up, my heart heavy with the kind of dread only a mother knows. The envelope had my name written in her delicate handwriting. I opened it slowly. "Mama," it began, "I know you think I don't understand why you made me stay away from Malik. I know you think you were protecting me. But the truth is, I love him not because he's perfect, but because he's honest. He told me everything about his father, about what happened between you and him. He said he never wanted to hide it. And that's when I realized, he's not Raymond. He's nothing like him." My hands trembled as I read on. "You always said love should be about truth. That's why I'm meeting him, not to defy you, but to understand what really happened. I can't spend my life hating someone I never got to know. I hope one day you'll forgive me for needing to see this through." The letter ended there, unsigned, unfinished. Tears blurred the words before I could finish reading. For the first time in years, I felt the sharp ache of regret twist inside me, not for losing Raymond, but for losing the openness I once had, the ability to love without fear. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. The house felt too quiet, too heavy. I realized then that no matter how much I tried to protect her, Leah's heart was her own, and maybe that was the hardest lesson a mother ever learns. Outside, a car passed by, headlights sweeping across the curtains. Somewhere out there, my daughter was sitting, across from the son of the man who once broke me, and I could only hope that their story would end differently than ours. Leah's heart pounded as she stood in front of the small cafe, downtown, the same one where she and Malik had met every Friday afternoon 2 years ago before everything fell apart. The air was cool, the faint hum of evening traffic weaving through the sound of clinking cups and murmured conversations. She took a deep breath before stepping inside. He was already there. Malik sat near the window, back straight, his hands clasped tightly around a coffee cup. He looked older now, not by years, but by weight. The kind of weight that comes from waiting too long for something you're not sure will ever come back. When he saw her, his lips parted, the corners lifting slightly in something between relief and disbelief. "Leah," he said softly, standing. "You came," she nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I almost didn't," he smiled faintly. "You always say that." They both sat down, the space between them filled with silence that felt heavier than words. For a moment, neither spoke. Leah stared at the tiny swirl of foam in her untouched cup, her fingers tracing the rim nervously. "I found out," she said finally. "About your father." "About mine." Malik's jaw tightened. He looked down, his knuckles whitening around the cup. "I figured she'd tell you one day, or maybe you'd find out on your own." "She didn't tell me," Leah said quietly. "She never could. I found out through you, through the letter you left me before you disappeared." He let out a slow breath, his gaze meeting hers. "I didn't disappear, Leah. She told me to stay away from you. And I thought, maybe she was right." Leah's eyes shimmered. "You think she was right to decide that for me?" Malik looked away, his reflection ghosted in the cafe window. "Your mom went through hell because of mine. Because of my father. I can't blame her for not wanting you tangled in that again. But you're not him," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You never were." He gave a small, hollow laugh. "Try convincing her of that." There was silence again, the kind that stretched and tested them both. Outside, rain began to tap lightly against the window, the first few drops scattering like whispers. Leah leaned forward. "Tell me what really happened, Malik. I need to know. I can't move on without understanding." Malik hesitated. His shoulders dropped, and the armor he'd carried for years seemed to slip away. "My father Raymond wasn't always the man your mom knew at the end. When he met her, he was trying to change. He'd left some bad things behind, but he couldn't escape the people he'd worked with. And when they came for him, he ran. He didn't leave her because he stopped loving her, Leah. He left because he thought she'd be safer without him." Leah's breath caught. "Safer?" Malik nodded slowly. "He made enemies. Dangerous ones. He used your mom's name once to protect himself, to get out of something ugly. He always regretted that. He used to tell me before he died that Denise was the one good thing he didn't deserve." Leah blinked, the words sinking in like slow rain through dry soil. "He said that?" "Yes," Malik said quietly. "He wanted to write to her, but he was sick by then. I promised I'd find her one day, to tell her the truth." Leah swallowed hard. "And that's why you sought me out." He nodded. "At first, yes. But then his voice faltered. Then it wasn't about promises anymore." Leah's heart twisted at the vulnerability in his eyes. "You fell in love." He smiled faintly, sadness and tenderness blending in that one expression. Harder than I ever planned to. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two souls caught between past mistakes and present truths. Leah reached across the table, her hand brushing his. "You should have told me." "I wanted to," he said. "But I thought if your mom found out, she'd hate me more than she already hated the memory of him." Leah pulled her hand back slowly. "She doesn't hate you, Malik, she's scared. Scared that if I love you, I'll end up with the same kind of pain she had." He nodded. "She's not wrong to be scared." Leah smiled softly, though her eyes were heavy. "Love's always a little scary." Outside, the rain thickened. The cafe lights shimmered against the wet glass. Everything felt suspended, fragile, timeless. Malik, she said after a pause, what if we tried again? Not to run away, not to hide, just to let things be different this time. He stared at her, searching her face for the certainty he'd lost long ago. Do you think she'd ever forgive me? Or him? Leah took a slow breath. Maybe forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. Maybe it's about who needs peace. Malik exhaled deeply, his shoulders softening. Then maybe it's time we stop hiding, Leah smiled faintly. Then let's not hide. He reached across the table again, and this time, she didn't pull away. For the first time in years, it felt like something old, something heavy had begun to lift between them. The ghosts of the past still lingered, but their voices were quieter now. As they stepped out of the cafe together, the rain washed over them, cold and cleansing. Leah looked up at the gray sky, her hand intertwined with Malik's, and whispered, "Maybe we can change what history left us." And though Malik didn't answer, his fingers tightened gently around hers, a silent promise that some stories don't have to end where they began. The rain hadn't stopped by the time Leah got home that night. Drops clung to her hair, tracing down her cheeks like tiny ghosts of everything she couldn't yet say. She stood for a long moment on the porch, staring at the front door, the same door that had closed behind her that afternoon, when she told her mother the truth she wasn't ready to hear. Inside, the lights were still on. Mama Denise sat at the table, her cup of tea untouched, the steam long gone. The letter Leah had written lay folded in front of her, creased from trembling hands that had opened and closed it too many times. When the door finally creaked open, Denise didn't look up right away. She heard the soft sound of Leah's shoes against the wood, the faint rustle of wet clothes. "Hey, Mama," Leah said quietly. Denise's fingers tightened around the cup before she finally raised her eyes. "You all right?" Leah nodded, though her voice wavered. "I met him." Denise inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that feels like it burns its way through you. "I figured you would." There was silence, that heavy, loaded kind that comes before either healing or heartbreak. "He told me everything," Leah said softly. "About his father. About why he left." Denise looked up sharply, pain flickering in her eyes. "Did he now?" Leah nodded again. "He said his father left because he thought he was protecting you. That he didn't want whatever mess he was in to touch you." Denise's jaw tensed. "Protecting me?" she repeated, bitterness threading through the words. "That's one way to call abandonment." Leah took a small step closer. "Mama, he regretted it." Malik said his father. "Regret doesn't change what happened," Denise interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. "Regret doesn't raise a child alone or pay rent when you're crying on the kitchen floor." Leah's eyes softened. "I know, but maybe it helps to understand why he did it. Maybe it helps to know he didn't stop loving you." Denise closed her eyes for a long moment. The memories she'd buried so deep, the smell of Raymond's cologne, the sound of his laughter, the night she'd watched him walk away, came rushing back with painful clarity. She'd spent decades trying to harden her heart against those images, but hearing his name again through Leah's gentle voice, it cracked something inside her. "Love," she murmured. That man talked about love like it was a song he could sing without knowing the words. Leah stepped closer until she was standing across the table. "Mama," she whispered, "he wasn't the only one who left something unfinished." Denise opened her eyes, meeting her daughter's gaze. "What do you mean?" Leah hesitated, then said, "He left behind a letter for you. Malik's had it for years. He didn't know if he should give it to you. But tonight, he did." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn envelope, the edges yellowed with time. Denise stared at it, her breath catching. Her name, Denise Carter, was written in Raymond's handwriting, that same looping style she hadn't seen since she was 25. Her hands shook as she took it. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Leah stood silently as her mother opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The ink was faded, but the words were still clear. "D, if you're reading this, it means I finally did what I should have done years ago, told the truth. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I couldn't bring what was chasing me to your door. I thought I could fix things from a distance. I thought keeping you safe meant keeping you away. But not a day went by I didn't regret it. You were my light in a world that never knew peace. I hope one day you'll forgive me, or at least understand that walking away was the hardest thing I ever did." By the time she finished, Tears had blurred the last few lines. Denise set the paper down gently, her shoulders trembling. Leah reached for her hand. "Mama?" Denise didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her voice was quiet, small, in a way Leah had never heard before. "All these years I thought he left because I wasn't enough. Because I loved him too much or too wrong." Leah squeezed her hand. "He left because he loved you right, maybe in the only way he knew how." The room fell silent again, but this time, the quiet felt softer, not empty, but healing. Denise let out a shaky breath and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Is he?" she began. Leah nodded. "He passed. A few years ago. Malik said he wanted you to know before it was too late." Denise nodded slowly, her eyes distant. "And Malik? He really loves you?" Leah smiled faintly. "He does. And I love him, Mama." Denise studied her daughter's face for a long moment. The same fierce tenderness she'd once seen in herself stared back at her. The same courage, the same flaw to love without measure. Finally, Denise stood, walked to the window, and looked out into the rain. "Bring him here," she said softly. Leah blinked. "What?" Denise turned, her eyes red but clear. "If he's brave enough to carry his father's name, and you're brave enough to love him anyway, then I should be brave enough to face both of you." Leah felt the tears she'd been holding finally fall. "Mama, are you sure?" Denise gave a small, tired smile. "Baby, I've been running from ghosts long enough. Maybe it's time I open the door and let them rest." Leah stepped forward and hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. Denise held her close, breathing in her daughter's scent, realizing that maybe love didn't have to mean forgetting. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about erasing pain, but remembering it with softer hands. Outside, the rain finally eased. The air was cool and clean, like the world itself had been washed of something heavy, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. The next afternoon, the air hung heavy with quiet anticipation. The house was spotless, though Denise couldn't remember cleaning it. Her hands had moved on their own, wiping, polishing, setting things right, as if tidying her space could prepare her heart for what was coming. Through the kitchen window, she could see the old magnolia tree swaying gently, its white blossoms trembling in the breeze. She used to love that tree. Raymond had planted it their first spring together, back when promises still felt unbreakable. Now it bloomed again, soft, full, and painfully symbolic. Denise glanced at the clock. 4:12 p.m., they'd be here any minute. Her stomach knotted. For a woman who'd faced single motherhood, unpaid bills, and a world that never went easy on her, it was strange that a knock on her own front door could make her this nervous. When it finally came, her breath caught. "Come in," she called. Her voice steady only by force. The door creaked open and Leah stepped inside, her hand laced with Malik's. He stood just behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, his expression calm but guarded. Denise took him in slowly. The resemblance was undeniable, the same sharp jawline, the same dark, searching eyes that once made her heart stumble. But there was something different, too. Malik's eyes didn't carry the arrogance of his father. They carried weight, humility, pain, and the kind of quiet respect that only comes from loss. "Good afternoon, Ms. Carter," Malik said, his voice low but firm. Denise nodded once, motioning toward the couch. "Come sit." They moved carefully, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace sitting between them. Leah perched on the edge of the couch. Malik sat beside her, hands clasped. For a long moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked loudly in the background, a soft reminder that time, though relentless, sometimes waited for courage. Finally, Denise broke the silence. "You favor your father," Malik looked down. "So I've been told." Denise studied him carefully. "But you don't sound like him. You don't carry yourself like a man who runs from hard things." He met her gaze, then steady, respectful. "I've spent my whole life trying not to." Something in her chest softened. "Leah told me what you said last night." "About why he left?" Malik nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd believe it." "I didn't at first," she admitted. "But I read his letter." A shadow flickered across Malik's face. "He wrote it the year he got sick. He wanted me to find you to tell you in person. I tried once, but you didn't want to hear it." Denise exhaled softly, guilt weaving through her voice. "I wasn't ready. I thought listening to you would mean forgiving him. And I wasn't ready for that either. Malik's expression softened. You don't owe him forgiveness, she shook her head. Maybe not. But I owe it to myself to stop hating the memory of him. The room fell quiet again, though this silence felt gentler, less sharp. Leah glanced between them, her heart swelling and trembling all at once. She could see it happening 2 generations, 2 wounds, finally beginning to close. Denise leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Malik, what kind of man was he in the end? Malik hesitated. His eyes shimmered as he spoke. A tired one, but a better one. He stopped running from his mistakes. He used to say, if he ever had one more chance to stand in front of you, he wouldn't say sorry, he'd just say thank you. For teaching him what love really was, even if he couldn't keep it. Denise's lips trembled. She turned her head slightly, her eyes glistening. He said that? Malik nodded. Almost every night. A tear slipped down her cheek, uninvited, but she didn't brush it away. It felt earned, like the ending of something that had lingered too long. Do you look like your mother? Denise asked suddenly, trying to lighten her tone. Malik chuckled softly. Everyone says I have her patience. But I got my father's stubbornness, Denise smiled faintly. Well, that's 2 things you and Leah have in common. Leah laughed quietly, her fingers still intertwined with his. The tension began to ease. Denise stood, walked toward the kitchen, and called over her shoulder, Y'all like peach cobbler? I made one this morning. Malik blinked, surprised. You made cobbler? Couldn't very well meet my daughter's young man with an empty table, she said with a small smirk. Leah's face lit up, and Malik stood respectfully. Thank you, ma'am. Denise carried the cobbler to the table, the sweet, buttery scent filling the air. As they sat together, it struck her how surreal it all felt to be breaking bread with the son of the man who once broke her heart. But life had a way of turning full circle, didn't it? As Malik reached for his fork, Denise said softly, You know, I used to think the past was something you could lock away. But watching you 2, I realize it's not about burying it. It's about making peace with it. Malik nodded, his voice sincere. That's all I've ever wanted for her, for both of you. Leah squeezed his hand under the table, whispering, See, Mama? He's not who you thought. Denise smiled faintly, her eyes still damp. No, baby. He's not. They ate quietly, the only sounds the gentle clinking of forks and the occasional soft laugh. It wasn't perfect, but it was human. It was honest. When Malik finally stood to leave, he turned to Denise. Thank you for letting me come. I know it couldn't have been easy. Denise nodded slowly. You remind me of him. But you're not him, and that's a good thing. Malik offered a small, grateful smile. I'll take that as a blessing. She placed a hand on his arm. You take care of my daughter, Malik. Don't make her forget what love feels like. He met her eyes. Never, ma'am. As the door closed behind them, Denise stood in the quiet house once again. But this time, the silence felt different, warm. Forgiving. She looked out the window, where Leah and Malik stood in the soft afternoon light, their hands intertwined, their laughter floating faintly back to her, and she whispered, half to herself, half to the past. You were right, Raymond. Love doesn't end. It just changes. Outside, the magnolia petals swayed gently in the wind, carrying the scent of something tender and new, the kind of peace that only comes after years of storms. 3 days later, the morning sun filtered through a soft haze as Denise parked her car beside the small, quiet cemetery on the edge of town. The kind of place you only visit when your heart is ready to stop running. The grass was damp from the night's rain, the air thick with the scent of earth and memory. She stepped out slowly, clutching a small bouquet of white magnolias in one hand, the same kind Raymond had once tucked behind her ear when they were young and foolish enough to believe love could outrun life. For years, she had promised herself she'd never come here, that graves couldn't answer questions and ghosts didn't deserve goodbyes. But after meeting Malik, after reading that letter, the bitterness she had built around her heart had begun to crumble, and now she was here not because she wanted to forgive him, but because she needed to. The headstone was simple. Raymond Cole, 1962-2014. No words about legacy or love, just a name and 2 dates. But to Denise, it held a lifetime. She knelt slowly, brushing the damp leaves from the stone with trembling hands. Hey, Ray, she said softly. It's been a long time. The words came awkwardly at first, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. She placed the magnolias down and stared at them for a long moment before continuing. "You'd probably laugh if you saw me here," she murmured. "I told myself I was done talking to you years ago. Done crying over a man who didn't have the courage to stay. But maybe that was never the full truth. Maybe I wasn't done, just too scared to face what stayed after you left." A breeze rustled through the trees, scattering a few petals across the ground. "I met your boy," she said after a pause. "He's a good man, Ray. Better than either of us ever were at that age. You'd be proud of him. He carries you in his eyes, but he's got something you never learned to keep. He's got peace." Her voice softened, breaking slightly. "He loves Leah. You should see them together, stubborn, sweet, both too brave for their own good. They remind me of us, before everything fell apart." She smiled faintly, tears welling. "And before you ask, yes, I still get angry when I think about how you left. I still hate that you thought walking away was the only way to love me. You broke me, Ray, but I guess I also understand now. You didn't know how to stay without hurting me more." Denise reached into her purse and pulled out the letter he'd written. She unfolded it, fingers tracing the faded words like they were a map to something she'd finally found. "I kept this," she whispered. "I thought about burning it the day Leah gave it to me. But then I read it again, and I realized I wasn't ready to let go, not of the anger, not of the love." Her voice trembled. "But I'm ready now." She folded the letter again, placed it gently beneath the bouquet, and exhaled a long, shaky breath that carried years of unspoken pain. "I forgive you," she said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do." For a moment, she thought she heard a bird call somewhere nearby, a soft, distant sound that felt like an answer. She stayed there a while, just sitting, letting the wind move through her hair, the weight of memory shifting into something lighter. And for the first time in decades, she didn't feel haunted. She felt human. As she stood to leave, she looked back at the headstone one last time. "You can rest now, Ray. We all can." The drive home felt different, brighter somehow. The world outside her window shimmered with the colors of early autumn. Children played on sidewalks, neighbors waved, and the radio hummed softly with an old soul tune she hadn't heard since she was pregnant with Leah. When she pulled into her driveway, Leah's car was already there. She found her daughter in the kitchen, humming as she poured lemonade into 2 glasses. Malik was fixing the loose cabinet door near the sink, something Denise had meant to do for years, but never got around to. The sight of them made her heart swell in a way that felt like healing. Leah turned when she heard the door. "Mama, you went out early. You okay?" Denise smiled gently, setting her purse on the counter. "I'm fine, baby. Just had a visit I should have made a long time ago." Leah's expression softened. "You went to see him?" Denise nodded. "Yeah, and I think he heard me this time." Malik looked up from his work, meeting her gaze with quiet understanding. "I think he'd be proud," he said. Denise smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'm more proud of you, both of you." Leah walked over, hugging her tightly. "Thank you, Mama." "For what?" "For letting me love him," Leah whispered. Denise closed her eyes, resting her chin on her daughter's shoulder. "I didn't let you, baby. You taught me how to." The 3 of them stood there for a moment, generations of pain, love and forgiveness woven into something soft and sacred. Later that evening, Denise sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the sun setting behind the magnolia tree. The petals shimmered in the golden light, and for a moment, she imagined she could feel Raymond's hand on hers again, gentle and fleeting. Life had a way of coming full circle, not in the way she expected, but in the way it was meant to. She smiled to herself and whispered into the fading light, "Thank you for the lesson, old love," inside. Leah's laughter echoed down the hall, mingling with Malik's deeper tone. The sound filled the home that had once felt empty, now alive again, with warmth, with possibility. And as dusk settled, Denise finally understood love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, it rebuilds, it forgives. A year had passed since that day at the cemetery. Time hadn't dulled the memories, but it had softened their edges. The air around the Carter house felt lighter now. Laughter lingered longer. Music drifted more freely through the rooms, and the quiet no longer felt like grief. That afternoon, Mama Denise stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, smoothing the creases of her lavender dress. Her hair, silver-streaked and soft, glimmered under the warm light. On the dresser sat an old photograph of her and Raymond, young and smiling, unaware of what life would demand from them. Next to it was a new one, Leah and Malik, their faces radiant with a love that had survived its testing. Today was their engagement dinner. Denise let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. A quiet, deep thankfulness that life had found a way to turn her heartbreak into her daughter's hope. The door creaked open. "Mama?" Leah's voice was soft, her tone still carrying that little girl lilt Denise could always recognize. She stepped into the room, her light yellow dress flowing with each movement. She looked stunning not because of what she wore, but because she carried peace now, the kind her mother had always prayed she'd find. "Baby," Denise said, smiling. "You look like sunlight," Leah blushed. "And you look beautiful. You sure you're okay with all this?" Denise turned to face her fully, reaching out to touch her cheek. "Leah, the only thing I ever wanted was for you to love without fear. Took me a long time to learn that love doesn't have to mean pain." Leah's eyes shimmered. "You taught me that, Mama." Denise smiled gently. "Maybe, but I think you and that boy taught me more than I ever taught you." They shared a soft laugh before Leah's gaze shifted toward the dresser. Her eyes lingered on the photo of her parents. "I wish he could see this." Denise followed her gaze, nodding. "Maybe he can," Leah smiled faintly. "I like to think so." Downstairs, the warm hum of conversation and music floated up. Malik's mother and Aunt Renee laughing in the kitchen, the faint clinking of glasses and the aroma of cornbread and roast chicken filling the air. It was a scene that felt like healing itself, generations once divided now sitting at one table. As Denise and Leah descended the stairs, Malik turned to see them. His eyes softened immediately, his entire face lighting up with that quiet love that had once terrified Denise, but now filled her with pride. "You look beautiful." "Mrs. Carter," he said sincerely. Denise smiled, her tone teasing but warm. "You can call me Mama Denise now, son. You earned it." Malik chuckled, a hint of emotion flickering in his expression. "That means a lot." Dinner was simple but joyful. The house filled with laughter, Renee cracking jokes, Malik's mother sharing old stories, Leah sneaking smiles across the table. Every so often, Denise would look around, her chest tightening with quiet awe. She realized that forgiveness had done more than free her. It had restored her family. It had given Leah a love story that wasn't haunted by the past. After dessert, as the evening light turned golden, Malik stood up and cleared his throat. "If it's okay, I'd like to say something." The room quieted, all eyes on him. He looked nervous, but certain, a reflection of his father's charm tempered with his mother's grace. "I know this family's story hasn't been simple," he began. "And I know the name I carry hasn't always brought peace. But standing here tonight, I just want to thank you, Mama Denise, for giving me a chance to write a new chapter. For letting me love Leah the way I wish my father could have loved you." Denise's eyes shimmered. Malik paused, then turned to Leah. "And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You didn't just love me. You taught me how to forgive myself for things I didn't do but carried anyway." Leah blinked back tears, her hand reaching for his. Malik smiled. "So tonight I don't just promise you forever. I promise to honor where we came from and to build something better from it." The room fell still, the kind of stillness that comes right before joy. Denise rose slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She walked over to Malik, placing her hand gently on his cheek. "You've already done that, son." He swallowed hard, emotion breaking through his composure. Denise looked around the room at her daughter, her sister, the family she thought she'd lost but somehow gained back tenfold, and said quietly, "This right here, this is what healing looks like." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the laughter had faded into soft echoes, Denise found herself back on the porch. The magnolia tree swayed gently in the moonlight. She sat in her old wicker chair, a blanket draped around her shoulders, the night humming with peace. Leah and Malik joined her, sitting side by side on the steps, their fingers intertwined. For a while, none of them spoke. The crickets sang. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle and rain. Then Leah said softly, "Mama, you ever think about what would have happened if you and Daddy had another chance?" Denise smiled, her eyes still fixed on the stars. "Sometimes, but then I look at y'all and I realize maybe we didn't need one." Some stories end so new ones can begin. Malik looked up at her. You really believe people can change, Mama Denise? She turned her head, her expression gentle but wise. I believe love can. The three of them sat there, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. And in that moment, Denise realized the truth she'd been circling her whole life. Love wasn't about holding on or letting go. It was about knowing when to do both. The moonlight bathed them in silver, the magnolia blossoms swaying softly like quiet witnesses to the generations of hearts finally at rest. Inside, on the mantel, the photo of Raymond and young Denise sat beside Leah and Malik's. Two stories, one broken, one healed side by side, a legacy not of perfection, but of peace. The church bells rang softly that morning, echoing through the quiet streets like a hymn carried on sunlight. Mama Denise stood just outside the chapel doors, her hands clasped together, her heart steady in a way it hadn't been for decades. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and warm wood. Gentle music drifted from the piano, a tune both tender and timeless. The guests whispered softly, smiles and tissues in hand, waiting for the ceremony to begin. It was Leah and Malik's wedding day. Denise took a slow, steady breath. She thought of all the years that had led to this moment, every fight, every silence, every lonely night she'd spent believing love had left her behind. And now, standing in the golden morning light, she realized love had only been waiting for her to open her heart again. A voice broke her reverie. You ready, Mama? It was Renee, radiant in a sea-green dress, her eyes glimmering with pride and mischief. As I'll ever be, Denise said with a small laugh. They shared a knowing look, the kind sisters exchange when words aren't needed. Then the music swelled and the doors opened. Denise turned just in time to see her daughter appear, Leah, glowing in ivory satin, her curls softly pinned, her eyes shimmering with quiet joy. She was breathtaking, not because of her dress, but because she looked whole. As Leah began her slow walk down the aisle, Malik stood waiting at the altar, his expression breaking into the kind of smile that could make a person believe in forever. Denise's throat tightened. She glanced up, whispering beneath her breath, You'd be proud, Ray. She's got your courage. But she's got my heart. The ceremony unfolded gently, no grandeur, no spectacle. Just love spoken softly, vows exchanged with trembling hands and full hearts. When the pastor said, You may now kiss the bride, Malik leaned forward, his hands cupping Leah's face with reverence, not possession. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but one of peace, a seal over everything they'd endured to stand there together. And in that moment, Denise felt something loosen inside her like the last knot of the past finally untied. As the congregation clapped, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. But they weren't the kind she'd cried for years. These were clean, unburdened. Later, at the reception under the magnolia tree in her backyard, laughter and music filled the air. Children ran barefoot on the grass, women danced with heels in their hands, and the scent of barbecue and peach cobbler mingled with the sound of jazz. Malik's mother hugged Denise tightly. Thank you, she whispered. For believing in them? Denise smiled. It took me a while, the woman chuckled. Doesn't matter how long it takes, honey, only that you get there. As evening approached, the light turned golden, the kind of light that makes everything look touched by memory. Leah and Malik shared their first dance under the magnolia blossoms. He held her close, his hand steady on her back, her head resting against his chest. Denise watched from her seat on the porch, a glass of sweet tea in her hand. Renee sat beside her, fanning herself lazily. You did good, sis, Renee said softly. Denise smiled, her eyes never leaving the couple. We both did. You ever think you'd see this day? Denise shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I used to think love had an expiration date. Turns out it just changes shape. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the music, watching the dance. The magnolia petals drifted down like blessings, catching in Leah's hair as she spun. Denise looked at her daughter, laughing, radiant, loved, and something inside her stilled completely. For the first time, she wasn't looking back. Later, as the stars began to bloom across the sky, Malik approached the porch. May I have this dance, Mama Denise? She laughed softly, standing with mock reluctance. You sure you can handle me, son? He grinned. I'll do my best. They danced slowly beneath the magnolia tree, the same tree Raymond had planted all those years ago. The light strung across its branches glowed softly, wrapping the moment in a gentle warmth. "You made her happy," Denise said quietly. Malik nodded. "She makes it easy," she smiled faintly. "You keep that up, and you'll have a long marriage." "I plan to," he said, his tone sincere. As the song ended, Malik pressed her hand to his heart. "Thank you for trusting me." Denise met his eyes, the eyes that once reminded her of the man who broke her heart, and saw something new there now. Redemption. "You gave me a reason to," she said softly. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words, then turned to rejoin Leah, who stood watching them with tears in her eyes. When they walked away, Denise stayed beneath the tree, looking up at the stars peeking through the branches. The wind whispered through the leaves, gentle and familiar. She thought of Raymond, of the letter, of the pain, of the lessons they'd both had to learn too late. But for the first time, the memory didn't ache. It simply existed like an old photograph, cherished for what it once was. She smiled faintly and whispered, "We did it. Ray, we finally broke the pattern." Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard laughter, his, carried softly on the breeze. As the night deepened, Denise sat quietly on the porch, listening to the hum of voices and the rhythm of music drifting through the warm air. The magnolia blossoms swayed, glowing pale against the dark, and in that peace surrounded by family, by love reborn from ashes, she realized something simple and profound. Love doesn't fade. It transforms. It grows through forgiveness, blooms through pain, and teaches us over and over that healing is just another name for love that refused to die. Denise leaned back, eyes closed, the faintest smile touching her lips as the sounds of joy carried into the night. 10 years had passed. The magnolia tree still stood proud in the backyard, though its trunk had grown thicker, its roots deeper, just like the family it shaded. Every spring, it bloomed with creamy white petals that filled the air with sweetness and memory. Mama Denise sat on the porch in her old wicker chair, a soft breeze teasing the hem of her cardigan. Her hands, now thinner and marked with time, rested gently over an open journal pages filled with careful, looping handwriting and pressed magnolia petals tucked between them. Inside, the house was alive with sound. The clatter of dishes, the faint hum of a familiar jazz tune, and the laughter of a child. "Grandma, look!" A little girl darted onto the porch, Raina, 7 years old, full of light and mischief. Her curls bounced as she held up a piece of paper proudly covered in crayon drawings, a stick figure family under a big tree. Denise smiled. "That's beautiful, baby. Who's that under the tree?" Raina pointed to 3 little figures, 2 tall, 1 small, holding hands. "That's Mommy, Daddy, and me." Denise chuckled softly, her eyes glistening. "You got your mama's smile, you know that?" Raina grinned. "Daddy says I got his nose too," Denise laughed. "That's all right. You got a little of everybody. Makes you special." The child climbed into her lap, nestling against her chest. "Grandma, tell me a story." Denise brushed a curl from her granddaughter's forehead. "You want a story or a truth?" Raina tilted her head. "A truth that sounds like a story." Denise smiled, the kind of soft, knowing smile that only comes from a life lived fully. "All right, then." She closed her journal and began. "Once upon a time, there was a woman who thought love was something that had to be perfect, something that stayed the same forever. She thought when people left, love died with them. But she was wrong." Raina looked up at her, eyes wide. "What happened to her?" "She met love again," Denise said softly. "Not the same kind, but the kind that grows like a tree that bends but never breaks. She learned that love can change faces, change forms, even change its name. But it never disappears. It just finds new places to live." Raina's brow furrowed in thought. "Like me?" Denise smiled. "Exactly like you, baby." From inside, Leah's voice called, "Mama! You coming in for dinner?" "In a minute!" Denise called back. Raina swung her legs idly. "Mama says you used to be real strict." Denise chuckled. "Did she now? Well, she's not wrong. I thought keeping her safe meant keeping her from mistakes. But sometimes the best way to love somebody is to let them learn their own lessons." Raina nodded seriously. "Like when Mama lets me fall off my bike?" Denise laughed. "Exactly like that." The little girl giggled, resting her head against her grandmother's shoulder. The late afternoon sun wrapped them both in warmth, turning the porch into a golden dream. After a while, Raina asked quietly, "Grandma, do you miss Grandpa?" Denise froze for a moment, not in pain, but in the kind of stillness that comes with peace. She looked out toward the magnolia tree, its blossoms swaying gently in the wind. "Sometimes," she said softly, "but not the way I used to. I don't miss the man who left, I miss the man who tried. And I thank him every day for giving me the lessons that made me who I am." Raina thought about that. "Mama says he's in heaven," Denise smiled faintly. "Maybe he is. But sometimes I think heaven is just the space between forgiveness and love where all the pieces finally make sense." The little girl frowned. "That sounds big." "It is, baby," Denise whispered. "It's the biggest truth I know." From the doorway, Leah appeared, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hair had streaks of silver now, but her eyes were still as bright as ever. "You telling stories again, Mama?" Denise smiled. "Just truths dressed up pretty." Malik stepped up behind his wife, slipping an arm around her waist. "She's good at that," he said warmly. "It's how she raised us all." Denise waved a hand playfully. "Don't give me all that credit. Y'all figured out the rest yourselves." Leah walked over, kneeling beside her mother's chair. "You still writing?" Denise nodded, patting the open journal. "Trying to finish a few thoughts before time finishes me first." Leah laughed softly, though her eyes shimmered. "Don't talk like that, Mama." "I'm not sad, baby. I'm grateful," Denise said. "I just want to leave behind something for her." She nodded at Raina, who was now dozing lightly in her lap. "A few lessons. A few memories. Something she can read when I'm gone and remember where she came from." Leah reached out, covering her mother's hand with her own. "She'll remember, Mama. We all will. For a while." They sat together in the fading light, 3 generations bound by the quiet power of love that had endured everything. As the sun sank lower, painting the sky in gold and lavender, Denise whispered almost to herself, "Funny how life comes back around. The girl I told to forget grew up and taught me how to remember." Leah leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "And you taught us how to forgive." Denise smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the magnolia tree, now a symbol of everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. "Forgiveness," she murmured, "was the door. Love was what walked through." The evening breeze carried the scent of blossoms across the porch. The crickets began their chorus, the world settling into its nightly rhythm. Inside, Malik called out, "Dinner's ready." Leah stood, gathering Raina into her arms. The child stirred, mumbling sleepily, "Finish the story later, Grandma?" Denise nodded, her smile soft. "Always, baby. Always." As they disappeared into the warm glow of the house, Denise sat back in her chair, closing her journal with a gentle sigh. The last light of the sun kissed her face, and for a moment, she felt a presence not haunting, but familiar. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. "See?" she whispered softly. "We did all right, Ray." And in the hush of the evening, as the magnolia petals swirled and settled, it almost felt like the wind answered. The house was still when Leah opened the old cedar box that sat on her mother's dresser. Dust floated through a beam of morning light, catching on memories, a string of pearls, a faded photograph of the magnolia tree, and one sealed envelope tied with a thin lavender ribbon. Her name was written on the front in Mama Denise's careful hand. Her throat tightened. It had been 3 months since the funeral. 3 months since the magnolia blossoms fell early, as if the tree itself had bowed in farewell. She sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, soft with age, carrying her mother's familiar scent of jasmine and lemon balm. "My sweet Leah, if you're reading this, it means I've finally gone where hearts rest easy. Don't be sad too long, I had a full life. I laughed, I loved, I learned. Most of all, I watched you become everything I once prayed to be. By the time you read this, Raina's probably taller, Malik's still fixing things that aren't broken, and you're still worrying about everyone but yourself. So let me tell you something simple. Peace isn't found in what we hold on to, but in what we let be. I spent too many years guarding my heart like it was a house that needed locks. Then you came along and taught me to open the windows. You reminded me that love doesn't always arrive the way we expect, but it always finds its way home. Promise me you'll keep that door open." Let joy in even when it hurts a little. Let memory visit, but don't let it stay too long. And when you look at that magnolia tree, don't think of loss. Think of roots, baby. Deep, stubborn, beautiful roots. That's what we are. Love always, Mama. Leah pressed the letter to her chest, tears sliding freely now, not from grief, but gratitude. She could almost hear her mother's voice in the stillness, warm and teasing. Don't ruin my good stationery with your crying, girl. Downstairs, the front door creaked. Malik's voice floated up, gentle. You okay, babe? She wiped her eyes and smiled faintly. Yeah, she left me a letter. He stepped into the room, Raina hovering shyly behind him. Grandma's handwriting? The little girl asked. Leah nodded and handed her the envelope. You can keep the ribbon. Raina's face lit up. She looped the lavender ribbon around her wrist like a bracelet. She said it's for remembering, she whispered, though no one had told her that. Malik put an arm around his wife's shoulders. What did she say? Leah looked toward the window, where the magnolia tree swayed in the morning breeze. Everything she always said, just softer. They stood there for a while, the three of them, wrapped in a silence that didn't hurt anymore. Then Leah folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. She wanted me to plant something, she said quietly. Something new. Outside, the ground near the magnolia tree was rich and dark from last night's rain. Leah knelt, digging a small hole with her hands while Raina fetched the sapling a young dogwood they'd picked up the week before. Malik steadied it as Leah pressed the soil around its roots. For Mama, Leah murmured. Raina sprinkled water from a silver cup. And for love, she added solemnly. When they finished, the dogwood stood slender but sure beside the old magnolia youth beside memory, the future beside the past. The breeze rustled through both trees, their leaves whispering together like old friends. Later that evening, Leah sat on the porch in her mother's wicker chair, journal balanced on her knees. She opened to a blank page and began to write, Today we planted a tree beside the magnolia. Mama said roots matter most. Maybe that's why forgiveness grows. It needs something strong to hold on to. She was right about everything. Love doesn't die. It changes its address. She paused, smiling through tears, then looked up as Raina ran across the yard, chasing fireflies. The child's laughter rose into the soft dusk, pure and bright. Malik stood by the fence, watching with quiet pride, his face illuminated by the porch light. Leah closed the journal and whispered to the night, You did good, Mama. Real good. The magnolia branches stirred in reply. As darkness deepened, fireflies blinked through the yard like scattered stars. The new dogwood's leaves shimmered in their light, as if echoing a secret only the earth understood that love, once planted, never really stops growing. Inside, Leah placed her mother's letter on the mantel beside the family photographs, one of young Denise and Raymond beneath the magnolia tree, another of Leah and Malik on their wedding day, and the newest Raina laughing in a field of flowers. 3 generations, one story told not in words, but in forgiveness, endurance, and quiet grace. She traced the edges of the envelope one last time, then whispered, Rest easy, Mama. We'll keep the windows open. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again, carrying with it the faint scent of magnolia and jasmine, the perfume of a life well lived, a love well learned, and a legacy that would outlast them all. I used to think the magnolia tree in Grandma's yard was magic. Maybe it still is. I'm 27 now, living in a small townhouse just a few streets from where Mama Denise raised us. Every spring I walk back there, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other, and sit under that tree, the one that has watched my whole family grow. The old magnolia still stretches wide, its blossoms as creamy and fragrant as ever. Beside it stands the dogwood my mother planted the year Grandma passed. Its branches bend differently, younger, eager, as if reaching toward the older tree for guidance. I call them the 2 hearts. Mama says Grandma used to sit right here and talk to the wind. When I was little, I thought she was talking to the tree itself. Now I understand she was talking to memory, to love, to time. Today the yard is quiet except for birdsong and the soft hum of the world waking up. I open the worn journal that once belonged to her, the pages yellowed, the ink slightly faded but still legible. At the top of one page she'd written in looping script, If you want love to last, let it breathe. I trace the letters with my thumb. They still smell faintly of jasmine. I've read these pages 100 times, but somehow they speak differently each year. Maybe because I'm still learning the same lessons she spent a lifetime mastering. I think of my parents, Mama Leah and Daddy Malik, who still dance in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. They say Grandma's voice plays through the radio sometimes, in the quiet moments between songs. I believe it. The way they move together feels like music she left behind. People ask me why I write. I tell them it's because I grew up in a house built from stories, some painful, some tender, all true. Grandma believed that words could heal if you told them softly enough. So I tell them softly. I flip to the last page of her journal, the one she left blank. Mama said Grandma wanted me to finish it one day, so I bring my pen to the paper and begin. Dear Grandma, you taught us that forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering without the ache. You showed Mama that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You taught Daddy that a name can change its meaning. And you taught me that home isn't a place, it's the people who stay when life bends. The magnolia and the dogwood are still growing. The roots are tangled now. I think they like it that way. Every blossom feels like a note from you. Thank you for the window light, the laughter in old rooms, and the courage to keep my heart open. I'm learning, Grandma. Still learning. I stop writing and look up. The morning light filters through the leaves, dappling the ground in gold and shadow. Somewhere, a wind chime sings. A memory drifts back, her hands guiding mine across a notebook, her voice whispering, "Tell the truth like you're singing it, baby." That's how the soul listens. I smile. Maybe that's what all of this has been, a song that never really ended. I close the journal and lie back in the grass. From here, the two trees look like old friends holding a conversation in silence. The magnolia steady, wise. The dogwood bright, eager. I imagine Grandma and Mama that way, Dee. My phone buzzes. It's a message from Mama. Dinner at 6. Don't be late. Your daddy's making cobbler, I text back. Wouldn't miss it. Then I linger a little longer. Because leaving this spot always feels like waking from a dream. Before I go, I whisper to the trees. She'd be proud. You know, the breeze stirs gentle, affirming. As I walk down the path, I glance back once more. Sunlight spills through the branches, scattering petals across the ground. They swirl briefly before settling soft, quiet, endless. I realize then that the story isn't over. It never really is. Grandma's lessons didn't end with her. They keep blooming season after season, through every word we speak, every kindness we choose, every moment we let love lead instead of fear. That night, at my parents' table, I tell Mama about the page I finished. She listens, eyes shining. She'd like that, she says. She always wanted the story to keep going. It will, I promise. After dinner, I slip outside while everyone's laughing inside. The sky is streaked with pink and indigo. I can smell magnolia and peach in the air. I sit on the porch steps, the same ones Grandma once sat on, and I whisper the last words I'll ever write in her journal. The words she taught all of us without ever saying them outright. Love outlives everything. The breeze answers, carrying the scent of jasmine, the sound of laughter, and something deeper, the hum of roots beneath the soil, binding generations together. I close the journal, smile into the night, and feel utterly at peace, because I know now what Grandma Denise meant all along. Love doesn't vanish. It settles in the people who remember, and it keeps on growing. If these words could travel through the air, you'd hear them the way I meant to say them, slow, soft, steady. The world always told me love was about holding on, about never letting go. But what I learned, what life had to teach me the hard way, is that sometimes the truest love is the one that learns when to loosen its grip. When I was young, I thought heartbreak was the end of a story. Now I know it's only a page turn. Every ending, every loss, every silence that seems too heavy to bear. It's just a pause before the next voice begins to speak. And mine, my voice, it still moves through the house I built. It still hums between the walls when Leah laughs, when Malik hums under his breath, when little Raina scribbles her stories under the magnolia tree. Maybe love never dies because it keeps finding new names to answer to. I used to talk to that tree as if it could listen. Maybe it did. Maybe all those prayers I whispered under its shade for strength, for forgiveness, for peace sank deep into the roots and waited. And now, when the wind moves through its branches, it sounds like a song made of every moment I thought I'd lost. If you're reading this, baby, whether you're Leah or Raina or whoever carries our name next, I want you to know this. We come from women who endured. Women who kept their hearts open even when the world told them to close it. We come from men who tried to make peace with their shadows and found their way home again through love. We come from choices that broke us and built us all the same. Never be ashamed of where you come from. Never believe love makes you weak. It's the strongest thing you'll ever do. I remember the first day I told Leah to forget. I said it sharp, thinking it was wisdom. But it wasn't. It was fear. Fear disguised as protection. Because when you've been hurt before, you start mistaking safety for love. I didn't understand then what I know now, that love doesn't need a shield. It needs a chance, and she gave it that. She gave it to Malik, and through him, to me. I see her still every time the morning light hits the magnolia petals. I see the way she looked at him, not with the naivety of a girl, but with the faith of a woman who'd seen what love could survive. And I see him, that boy who carried his father's face but none of his sins. The way he honored the past without letting it define him. The way he proved that legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you heal. Some nights, I dream of sitting under that tree again. Leah's beside me, grown and strong, her laughter full. Raina's voice echoes through the yard, chasing the fireflies. Malik's humming that same tune his father once played, only slower, gentler, and I think to myself, this is what forgiveness looks like. It doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. It gives it meaning. It turns pain into a story that saves someone else's heart. Maybe that's why I kept writing all those years, because the only way to make sense of sorrow is to give it shape, to put it into words so it can breathe. That's how healing works. You tell the truth until it stops hurting to say it. The truth is, I loved, I lost, I forgave, and it was enough. If I could leave you one thing more than this journal, more than my recipes or my pearls, it would be the courage to stay soft in a world that teaches you to harden. To look at what broke you and still say, thank you for the lesson. Because, baby, every heartbreak you survive makes room for something stronger, not harder, but wiser. When you feel alone, sit under the tree, listen. You'll hear the wind telling our story. You'll hear laughter and regret and the rhythm of love that outlasted time. And if you close your eyes long enough, you'll feel me there in the breeze that touches your cheek, in the sunlight that warms your hands, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. That's where love lives now. Not in the past, but in everything it left behind. The morning light spills across Leah's kitchen now, catching on the framed photographs that line the wall. There's one of Mama Denise on her porch, her hand raised mid-laugh, the magnolia tree blooming behind her. Beside it hangs a newer picture, Raina holding a book, her first published collection of short stories. On the dedication page she wrote, "For my grandmother, who taught me that forgiveness is the root and love is the bloom." Leah sets a vase of fresh magnolia blossoms on the table, the scent sweet and grounding. Malik walks in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "She'd love this," he says, setting one down in front of her. Leah smiles. She's here. Outside, the magnolia branches sway gently. The dogwood beside it is taller now, its leaves brushing against the older tree like a child reaching for a parent's hand. Raina steps onto the porch, her voice calm but filled with something steady, the tone of a storyteller who's learned from generations before her. "I think it's time we tell her story," she says. Leah nods, her eyes glistening. Tell it the way she'd want, slow and full of grace. Raina opens her notebook. The first line she writes is simple. "My grandmother told my mother to forget a man once." But love had other plans. The words flow easily, as if guided by a hand she can no longer see. And as she writes, a soft wind rises through the yard, stirring the blossoms, carrying the faintest trace of jasmine through the open window. Somewhere, maybe not far at all, a familiar voice murmurs, "Keep the windows open. Baby." The breeze passes through the house, brushing the pages, making them flutter like the wings of something newly freed. Later that evening, when the sky deepens to velvet and stars begin to bloom, the family gathers under the magnolia tree. Candles flicker in glass jars, casting golden halos across their faces. Laughter hums low, gentle. Raina reads aloud from her new story, her grandmother's story, her voice steady and clear. When she finishes, no one speaks right away. Then Leah reaches for her daughter's hand. "She'd be proud of you," she says softly. Raina smiles, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. She already is. The night hums with peace, The magnolia blossoms sway slowly above them, scattering petals like blessings. Malik tilts his head back, looking up through the branches. Look, he whispers. A single petal drifts down, landing in Raina's open palm. She lifts it to her heart. Thank you, Grandma, she murmurs. The air stills. The candles flicker once, then burn steady again. And somewhere, maybe in the rustle of leaves, maybe in the quiet between heartbeats, the echo of a woman's voice seems to sigh. You're welcome, baby. Keep growing. The night deepens, but the story doesn't end. It lingers in the scent of magnolia, in the laughter carried on the wind, in the pages of journals yet to be filled. Because love like this doesn't fade. It roots itself in generations. It waits in the soil of memory. Patient, eternal, alive. And when someone whispers the name Mama Denise, the wind always answers soft, forgiving, and full of grace.